All right, what about the Cowboys? Adversity is hitting them pretty hard. First of all, what'd you think about the Mike Leslie situation with Trayvon Diggs? As somebody who's been around this team for a long time and been outside many situations like that or been around it, what were your thoughts instantaneously?
You'll like this because I do think you like when Uncle Mo gets into some story time. It did make me think of a confrontation I had with Terrell Owens. But before I get to that, if you do want to hear that story,
I very much so.
It's just, boy, it really is reflective of this team and this head coach. I think this head coach is kind of thin-skinned. There seems to be a lot of excuse making. I told you a few weeks ago, I thought the Cowboys might be able to right the ship, kind of hang in there, and who knows, maybe somehow be in a playoff conversation. So at some point this season, I don't see that path anymore. So it's almost like things have flipped. I thought Cowboys had a chance, and like Baylor was done, and it was time to start thinking about the next coach. It's all flipped. And by the way, I need to give you credit where credit's due. I thought you were being sort of, I didn't know why, because you're not a pom-pom guy, but you brought up something, how Baylor could somehow get on a roll and get it to 8-4. And I think you may have predicted 7-5. You were absolutely right. I didn't see it. I didn't see any path toward that. And yet the Cowboys have gone the way Baylor looked like they were going. They're done. And the Diggs thing was embarrassing on a lot of levels. I mean, first of all, this generation of players that you would be in full uniform after a tough loss, which they kind of climbed back in the game, and within like 4 or 5 minutes of getting to think about what had to happen. McCarthy has to give the little post-game address to his players. Diggs has to get to his phone, see a tweet written about him, leave the locker room. They haven't even let the press in the locker room, and go out and find Leslie. Here's how big a rabbit ears Diggs had. He saw Leslie. He must have made eye contact on the way in, sees the tweet, and goes, I just saw that guy. In fact, I know this is how it happened because he said this on Micah Parsons' podcast. And he goes out and, wow, it just, you talk about, this is, especially you being a Philly guy, and I think there's a level of toughness that you have to be, especially like South Philly. There's thoughts of that. This is just really soft, is the way this comes across. And that's the way people, I think, look at this organization anyway. But it's bad when you reinforce it with what happened the other day. Now, I'll say this. I've been in these situations. I don't have a problem with players confronting reporters. I've had it happen plenty of times. Listen, I've had Baylor administrators very upset with something that I've done and come right at me. And you know what? I'm okay with it. I'm okay. Like either I go, hey, sorry, I was in the wrong, or I go, I try to usually de-escalate, if you can believe it. Not always. I've probably been the escalator of some confrontations. But think about that. Even with my great relationship with Baylor and my years of loving this place, I get into it with them. I guess it's like family members. We do have it out from time to time on certain things I've either said or done or whatever. But one time after a Cowboys game, I was and this was not out waiting. We were in an interview area, and T.O. came to the podium, and there were about 40 to 50 reporters standing around. It was after an NBC night game, and the Cowboys won that game. He had a big night, and they brought him to the podium, and I'm just kind of, monitoring what he's saying. At that point, I guess I was writing and on the radio in Dallas, and he just goes, I heard what you said, Matt Mosely. I heard what you've been saying on the radio about me. And it's just in front of everybody. He comes right at me. And so, again, that's not a good forum for me, to be hollering something back at him. So I just let him say his piece. And I was just like, dang, this this is interesting. I mean, it didn't really rile me. I think I was more amused than anything. But I did afterwards walk up to him in the tunnel and just said, "Hey, I'm here. Like, if you want to talk about something, I'm fine." And he was playing, and he was with a buddy that played for the Cavs at the time, and I think it was a little guard named Damon somebody. No, you could think of it. I think his name was Damon.
Not Damon Stoudemire, obviously.
No. Yeah. This was a guard
Damon
that was
West?
with the.
No, not Damon West.
No. Damon. Yeah, his name was Damon. And so, anyway, I'd have to look it up, but it was like, I'll tell you, because I used to see Rajah Bell around. It was somebody kind of that era.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, he happened to be with T.O. and this Cavs player started kind of doing something like, T.O. was saying, "What you going to do, chump?" to me. And then the Cavs players started doing it to me. Like, "What you going to do, chump?" And they were raising their, and like, I was sort of shocked. I'm like, I got one of the most famous NFL players and this Cleveland Cavs player. Was his last name Hack? No, that's a golf writer. Anyway, shouting at me after a game. So again, I just said I did not engage physically, I'm going to go fight T.O. because that's a losing, that nobody wins there. And I promise you, I don't fare well in that scene. And I just sat there and I go, "Hey, I'm here. You want to talk? We'll talk." And it was like what you going to do, chump? And then they just kept walking and left.
Damon Jones.
That's it. Yeah.
I just looked.
Yeah, that's the Cavs player. That's exactly who it was. And T.O. always had.
How did that affect your coverage of him and the team going forward?
I had moments where I was kind of okay with T.O. but that stuff didn't help. And again, I was really young, and I was probably a little caught. I mean, this guy transcended being just a normal football player. He was like a huge, full-blown celebrity kind of guy. And he had all these, he had an accidental overdose at one point that became a huge story.
That was so bizarre.
And
remember his
there were helicopters.
You were there.
Yeah, I was there for all that. And so I don't know. I was doing an interesting thing at the time because I was kind of transitioning into writing columns and being more opinionated. And then I had a radio show with this famous old sports writer and in Dallas. Yes. Yeah. And we were just sort of known as, we didn't hold back on things. And I think we were sort of at the time considered probably toughest on people and local athletes in the market. And so I guess my thought is I didn't really have an issue. It was a weird thing, and I had it happen in the locker room at times. People approach me or say something, but I always kind of tried to have a little bit of presence of self-awareness. Listen, I am a smart aleck and I tend to get under people's skin. So I can't be shocked when they're provoked and they come after me. Now, what I tried not to do was be like one of these weird Bayless types who's just doing it only to get attention. I did not like that. I drew the line at that. But if I wrote something they didn't like and they came after me, I really did not have a problem with it. So the problem with what it was not confronting, that wasn't even the problem. If that had to happen in the locker room, I think it would have been a little bit better. Or even out at, if he took Mike Leslie aside and did it, I've seen some ugly times. I've seen players handle it really well. I've seen some ugly stuff that happens. But yeah, the worst part of it was not even the confrontation. It's the fact that he was on his Twitter within and even McCarthy, I think, brought that up. Within, 4 or 5 minutes of losing a big game.
Yeah.
It just speaks to the psyche and the mentality of, he's probably not the only one that's done something like this, but of this team and this player specifically, that's the kind of stuff you're thinking about after a game. And all that was said by Mike Leslie was basically like, what is Trayvon Diggs doing on this play? Well, think about how horrible fans and people are on Twitter and social media. There are far worse things said about players, but for whatever reason, this really got under this player's skin. But again, it makes them look soft. It makes them look extremely sensitive. I mean, Pete, you have to deal with, and it used to bother Joe Buck immensely. You think, well, Joe Buck's huge. But all that criticism on Twitter and like Witten, it just killed. Like Witten, and of course that crew was struggling so much, but he got crushed on social media. You know, like even with what you do on ESPN games, somebody out there is going to not like. Somebody's going to decide you're being.
I'll tell you a good story that's
okay.
Continues to bubble up. My first game for ESPN was Kansas State, Nebraska, and it was college basketball. It was December, like 3 years ago, and it went really well. Right, like I got more work right away. But during the course of the game, I made the boneheaded mistake of saying not the Wildcats in referencing Kansas State. I said the Jayhawks, right? So, yeah. So I get it on Twitter a couple times afterwards, and it's kind of like, okay, whatever. But the more my career has moved forward, like somebody will always show up in comments of stuff that I do and say, hey, like your credibility will be served by not calling Kansas State the Jayhawks. I'm like, it's 3 years ago. And you have to just like you have to just stop looking at that stuff. I talked to, and I know we're going to share this with you, but I talked to Sawyer Robertson yesterday about that, about, staying. He was like, and what a great kid, but he said, hey, if I have to post something basically to repost it, and it sounds like whether that's a contract obligation, he said, I'll download Instagram and repost it. But he was like, when he mentioned Twitter or X or whatever the hell you want to call it, he was like, I can't even go there. And he said sometimes he gets crap when he plays well because bettors don't like that he went over on stuff.
Well, he's got to learn how to take that stuff as a compliment, but he's smart to, only dabble in it. That's very smart. Most kids don't learn that. There was some Baylor player I was trying to recently, like maybe a former Baylor basketball player or something. I was going to try to tag them on something, and I realized they didn't have a Twitter account. And maybe Jared Butler or somebody used to be like that. Man, that's the height of like there's a star kid at the high school where my daughter goes. There's this like unbelievable running back. Yeah, Lake Highlands, and his name's Christian Rhodes. And I tried to put Baylor onto him, and unfortunately, everybody in the country now knows about him. He's a junior, and he's getting offers from Miami, Ole Miss, Oklahoma State, every single school in the country. And I put Baylor on him first, but unfortunately, they already had 2 running backs committed for 2026. But I thought this was funny. The coaches told me yesterday, they're like, yeah, we have to manage all his social media accounts because he just doesn't care and he won't even do social media. And I thought to myself, well, that's great. Yeah. That's not a bad thing about him. It was almost like they were complaining to me. They're like, our coaches have to handle all his social media. And I thought to myself, how refreshing is that? This kid is blowing up before our very eyes. He's 6'2", 215. He runs a 4.5. Like he's a monster and he doesn't care. Like he wants nothing to do with the social media. And I thought, man, what
advertising I would think for coaches.
I think so. I think that's pretty awesome. Honestly.
Last question for you. What is the Cowboys' identity right now?
Soft. They don't have one. They certainly don't have a run game. I mean, their only thing that could possibly save the day is if somehow they could get Micah back and Duran. I mean, it's taken Duran a long time to come back from that injury. And I mean, like, I would say this Atlanta game becomes, I know people are probably thinking, well, the season's over. And maybe it is, but like, because honestly, if they lose this game, they could go into Thanksgiving at 3-7.
Yeah.
So I would say they don't have an identity. I think soft. I think I give the defense an out. I literally Zimmer. I wouldn't fire him. Like I know he had some horrible early season kind of things, but right now they don't have the personnel to really accomplish much. And again, they had a chance to go win that game late the other night.
Yes.
I think the offense is just I mean, and there's for some reason people are extremely defensive of Dak. I don't understand it. Like I'm like, wait, we've been criticizing quarterbacks since the beginning of football. Why in the world and they like, well, what y'all keep mentioning that he's the highest paid player in the NFL. Why wouldn't we mention that? Like we've done that for years in the NBA. Pete, you have an NBA background. You're held to that standard. Once you get paid like a superstar, that's how you're going to be covered. Yeah. And so this like, it's not Dak's fault. It's the O-line. It's this or that. What are you talking about? Like his job is to elevate a team that is struggling. And he's doing just the opposite, the exact opposite. Like that was a horrible interception that he threw when they were only down 13-10, and he threw that interception. And yeah, what's his name didn't fight for the ball, CD, but he underthrew that ball. He looks like a deer in headlights. And so I don't, this team really, their only identity is not having one. They have not established really anything. And what they need is their star quarterback to carry them. And he's not getting it done. And it's a really sad thing to watch because I think he's someone who has all the intangibles and has a great leadership traits. And I mean, Pete, all these motivational, I think you and I should have done that, by the way. We should have like launched a career like motivational speakers. I mean, that's like a cottage industry now, but I think Dak is like that kind of person. Like he's an inspirational type guy, but the game's not there. And the game's not there. So he's kind of like Matt Rule. The best work he does is in the off season.
Matt Mosely, the best work he does is in the afternoons and also with us. Check him out today, ESPN 1660, Central Texas. Matt, dude, that was a great conversation. I can't thank you enough for the time.